Tonight, immigration protests are growing in cities across the country.
Hands off our students!
The LAPD is reporting nearly 400 people arrested since Saturday. In Texas, the governor says he will deploy the National Guard ahead of planned protests there this weekend. And now new images of ICE agents seen chasing farm workers through a field.
And then what do you do now that your mommy's been gone for a little bit? What are you trying to do to help around here?
Save money.
You're saving money. What are you saving money for?
To take her out.
And as the Trump administration ramps up arrests of migrants at court hearings and what would otherwise be regular Homeland Security check-ins, we'll see firsthand how those arrests are affecting their families and the chilling effect lawyers say it will have on the legal immigration process. An inside look at the extraordinary security heading into President Trump's military parade in Washington, D.C. Heated deliberations, reported fighting in the jury room, even a mandated cool down. Tonight, the jury's split verdict in the retrial of Harvey Weinstein. You know him as Ted Lasso fan favorite Nate Shelley. Tonight, we talk with Nick Mohammed about his next project, about an improver thrown into a criminal underworld in deep cover. A music icon, singer, songwriter, and former leader of one of the biggest bands of all time. Tonight, we remember the legacy of Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, the reclusive artistic genius who battled his own mental health struggles and shunned the spotlight.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with those growing protests sparked by sweeping immigration raids and President Trump's military response. Over the past 24 hours, we've seen large rallies and marches from coast to coast, from New York to Atlanta, Chicago, and beyond. And tonight we have images of the raids and arrests that are provoking people to protest in the streets. ICE agents chasing farm workers through a strawberry field in Oxnard, California. In Omaha, Nebraska, ICE agents storming a major meat production plant. Dozens were arrested just after 9 o'clock in the morning. Back in Los Angeles, surveillance video appears to show federal agents boxing in a car, detaining the driver, leaving a child and mother behind. ICE is also sharing this photo of what they say was a targeted enforcement operation with the National Guard standing by. We talk with an LA County supervisor about the situation on the ground in a moment. But first, our national correspondent Matt Gutman is tracking the growing protests across the country.
Tonight, tensions building in the city of Los Angeles after over 200 were arrested overnight, and anger over the Trump administration's immigration crackdown and its deployment of federal troops to LA boiling over into other major U.S. cities. From Baltimore to Chicago, where a car drove through a group of demonstrators, 17 arrested there. In Boston, hundreds outside the State House. Protesters in Seattle clashing with police. And in New York City, demonstrators protesting workplace arrests they say are stoking fear throughout communities, coast to coast. And tonight, those jarring images from Southern California. ICE agents filmed chasing farm workers through strawberry fields around 6 a.m. Tuesday. And in Omaha, Nebraska, the state's largest yet immigration sweep, targeting a meat production plant. Dozens arrested there.
They just came in and said that it was a raid and we had to get everybody out of production.
Outside the plant, protesters jumping on a vehicle to try to stop law enforcement. And back in Los Angeles,
this is the canister from the tear gas that they threw at her.
That dramatic surveillance video appearing to show federal agents boxing in this car, reportedly using tear gas on the passengers and detaining the driver, leaving a toddler, an infant, and their mother behind. The Department of Homeland Security saying in a statement the suspect was wanted for punching an officer. Another image drawing sharp criticism tonight, pictures of armed National Guardsmen accompanying ICE officers on a raid. Major General Scott Sherman, in charge of those military personnel, staging just outside of Los Angeles, saying his troops will not only protect agents, but will detain demonstrators.
So strictly for the protection of the federal personnel and the protection of the federal building, they're allowed to temporarily detain and wait for law enforcement to come and arrest them.
In an emotional press conference, 30 Southern California mayors coming together. Arturo Flores, the mayor of Huntington Park, and a combat veteran appealing to the military.
These are Americans. And when we lifted our hands and we swore the oath to defend the Constitution and to defend this country, that oath was to the American people. It was not to a dictator. It was not to a tyrant. It was not to a president. It was to the American people.
In the wake of those violent protests, a rare address to California and the nation from Governor Gavin Newsom, calling Trump's decision to activate about 4,800 troops, more than the number deployed in Iraq and Syria, theatrics and traumatizing.
When Donald Trump sought blanket authority to commandeer the National Guard, he made that order apply to every state in this nation. This is about all of us. This is about you. California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next.
And on Capitol Hill today, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth seeming to confirm that, telling lawmakers the National Guard could be deployed to other immigration protests across the country.
Part of it is getting ahead of a problem so that if in other places, if there are other riots in places where law enforcement officers are threatened, we would have the capability to surge National Guard there if necessary.
And just hours ago, Texas Governor Greg Abbott mobilizing the Texas National Guard to San Antonio, where large-scale peaceful protests are planned.
We want to make sure that what has happened in California does not happen in Texas.
Matt Gutman joins us now from Los Angeles. Matt, I understand you just got off the phone with the governor's office. What did they have to tell you?
They said he was particularly disturbed, Lizzie, to see those images of those ICE aides and chasing those farm workers through those strawberry fields here in Southern California. Now, you can see it's pretty subdued here outside these federal buildings in downtown Los Angeles. Still, that curfew is in effect tonight in parts of downtown Los Angeles. Tomorrow night as well, Lindsay.
All right, Matt Gutman for us. Matt, thanks so much. For more on the situation on the ground in Los Angeles, let's get right to LA County Supervisor Catherine Barger. Supervisor, thank you so much for taking the time. Downtown Los Angeles now has a curfew, as you know. Last night, police still made hundreds of arrests. Do city officials and police feel that they're able to control the situation there?
At this point, yes, and that's why the mayor did impose a curfew, because we know that most of what's happening in terms of breaking the law is happening at night. And so at this point, I think LAPD and sheriff both feel they've got it under control. But, you know, I just remind people that first and foremost, we live in a country where the rule of law still exists and no one is above it. And that includes how we approach immigration enforcement. I think that's something that is important to remember when we look at the people that are just opportunists, that are looting and attacking and doing things that, quite frankly, have nothing to do with the immigration enforcement.
What role is the National Guard playing, and what coordination do they have with local law enforcement?
The National Guard really is focused on protecting the federal buildings, which were under attack day one. But they were brought in early on, I believe, because the federal government did not feel that their agents were being protected. We saw rocks being thrown. We saw agents being attacked. We saw the buses being blocked. And so the National Guard is really focused on the federal buildings, and the law enforcement is out on the streets trying to control the protest.
Have you been briefed on plans for the Marines once their use of force training is complete?
You know, I have to say that the frustration that I've had is there's been a lack of communication and coordination, and we need sensible cooperation between the federal and local authorities, and immigration enforcement should be orderly, but it should be done with communication in mind. And that's what's been lacking. I think that's what's caused chaos. But the training as it relates to where the National Guard and even the Marines, they are more backup at this point. And I would argue that the police, and I see it each and every day I'm downtown, are on the front line, really working on crowd control and trying to control the craziness on the street.
What are you hearing from your constituents about the ICE raids?
My constituents are frustrated, quite frankly, with the leaders, and feel that as leaders, we should be working together. And there is a lack of local cooperation, but also federal cooperation. And what I hear from my constituents, and overwhelmingly, is that you know, enforcement should be in place for the ones that are the felons. And what I tell people is we, the state and this county, kicked ICE out of our jails, which is where they would normally pick up the criminals that they are talking about going into the community and getting. So we've actually forced ICE to go into the community to find these individuals that everybody agrees on both sides of the aisle need to be picked up and deported. But because we don't have a relationship in our jails, they are let out, and then it's up to ICE to go and find them in the community. And really, this is a byproduct of that, in my opinion.
What is your message in particular to the federal government tonight?
My message to the federal government is, we need to work together. There is no question that there's a referendum in play that the voters, this was something that President Trump ran on and was very vocal on. And so we need to work together, but it starts with trust. And I know there's a lack of trust across the board because I've talked to some that say that the federal government's concern is that they work with local, that they're going to undermine the safety of the ICE officers that are going out and doing their job. So it's about building trust, and trust is earned. And it's something that as a leader here, I stand ready to work with our partners, both at the federal, state level, to make sure that this is done in a way that really does protect the community and is done to protect the community from these felons that, quite frankly, don't deserve to be in this country.
Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Barger, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
A federal judge in New Jersey has ruled that the government, for now, cannot continue to detain or deport Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University graduate student detained in Louisiana since March. The White House accuses Khalil of siding with Hamas, but has not provided substantive evidence of that. The judge's order goes into effect Friday morning, allowing time for the administration to appeal. Now to that split verdict in Harvey Weinstein's retrial on charges of sexual assault. Reports of heated deliberations in the jury room, the judge ordering a cooling off period, and Weinstein's complaint to the judge. ABC's Aaron Katersky has the story.
After days of chaos and infighting among jurors, tonight a split verdict in the sex crimes retrial of Harvey Weinstein, the one-time Hollywood kingpin found guilty of sexually assaulting production assistant Mimi Haley in 2006.
To those predators who still believe they can exploit, abuse, and walk away unscathed, your time is running out.
The jury acquitted Weinstein of sexually assaulting a former model, Kaya Sokolow, when she was 19. Tonight, she is still declaring victory.
I am very happy of today's verdict. It's a big win for everyone. Harvey Weinstein will be in jail.
The verdict came after the defense asked for a mistrial over discord in the deliberation room. The jury foreman, who had accused fellow jurors of attacking one another, sent a note telling the judge, "I can't go back in there with the other jurors." The foreman said other jurors were yelling at him, trying to change his mind. "I feel afraid inside there. I can't be inside there." The judge said he would order a cooling off period. Weinstein then spoke directly to the judge. "You are endangering me, Your Honor. I am not getting a fair trial." But a short time later, that jury reaching a unanimous verdict on 2 of the 3 counts. Just extraordinary, Linsey. The jury foreman saying they keep attacking me. The judge reminding jurors they need to be civil when they return tomorrow to decide the most serious count, accusing Harvey Weinstein of raping Jessica Mann, an aspiring actress. Linsey?
Quite an outcome. And Aaron, turning to another high-profile trial, week 5 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. We're hearing the prosecution could be close to calling its final witnesses. Do they think that they will wrap up at some point next week?
By the end of next week, for sure, maybe even the middle of next week, Linsey. First, Jane, Sean Combs' ex-girlfriend, who's testifying under that pseudonym, is going to finish cross-examination probably tomorrow. Prosecutors then want to call one of Sean Combs' assistants before giving some summary information to help the jury make sense of all of this evidence that's been presented here over the last 5 weeks, Linsey.
All right, Aaron Katersky for us. Thanks so much. And let's dig deeper into today's testimony. ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona was in the courtroom once again. What stood out to you today, Bernarda?
I think the hours of going through the text messages of Jane. The defense focused their entire cross-examination of going through text messages from 2021. I think they got up to 2023. They're still not into 2024 yet. You have to think, Linsey, that the defense is in a different position than with other witnesses when it comes to Jane. This is why I say that. Because because, number one, the defense is paying for Jane's legal fees, her attorneys, but also because the defense had the advantage of being able to speak to this witness after Sean Combs was already in custody. In fact, I think they said that the last time they spoke to the witness was probably April or even March earlier this year. So they had the opportunity to know what this witness is going to say, to know her demeanor, to learn how to ask questions of this witness that they didn't have that opportunity with other witnesses. So this gives them a great advantage.
So at one point, Jane testified that there was a 2-month stretch where there weren't any of the so-called hotel nights.
Correct.
Why is that significant for the defense?
So two reasons why it's significant for the defense. Because number one, during her direct examination, she said that 90% of the time that she spent with Sean Combs, it was engaging in these hotel nights, that it wasn't a relationship in the sense that she was getting anything out of it, and said that Sean Combs was using her for these hotel nights. But the defense was able to poke holes in that and say, wait, hold up. You were together with Sean Combs on these dates. Specifically, let's look at these text messages. And you didn't engage in a hotel night during that time. And in fact, there was a 2-month period where there were no hotel nights. So this wasn't a relationship that was strictly about using you for these hotel nights. So that was important for the defense to bring out in front of this jury. I don't know exactly whether they got their point across, though, because it just seemed that for hours, we were just reading text message after text message after text message. So I think in terms of they're bringing the text messages out and doing closing arguments, they're going to tell this jury, this is why it's important. This is how you should evaluate these text messages.
I know you're describing the text messages as a bit tedious, but do you think that inch by inch, the defense is kind of swaying the jury?
Yeah, I think they are poking holes in the sense of whether this was consensual or not, these hotel nights, whether it was consensual or not, because when you have these mixed signals where she's like, I love these hotel nights. In fact, that she's planning these hotel nights. In fact, she's contacting entertainers for these hotel nights. It gives a different message. So in terms of that, yes, but I would say, though, that still with these text messages, that it's hard for this jury to follow right now. So they're going to have to land that plane doing closing arguments.
All right. Still a few weeks away from that.
Yes.
All right. So we'll be seeing you back here. Bernarda, thank you. Now to the investigation into the death of a Navy sailor whose body was found in a wooded area near Norfolk, Virginia, nearly 2 weeks after she was last seen. The sailor's mother says she learned her daughter was missing not from the Navy, but from her daughter's staff and from media coverage. Tonight, another sailor has been detained in her case. Here's ABC's Whit Johnson.
Tonight, the Navy confirms they found the body of missing sailor Angelina Resendiz, and a fellow sailor is now in pretrial confinement in connection with her death. Resendiz was 21 years old, a culinary specialist assigned to the USS James E. Williams, a destroyer based in Norfolk, Virginia. She disappeared from her barracks on May 29th, the Virginia State Police issuing a critically missing adult alert on June 3rd. Her body was found Monday, a week later, in a wooded area of the city. Navy officials have not released her cause of death or the identity of the sailor in custody.
This person is a real person. She's a human being.
Her mother, Esmeralda Castle, critical of the Navy's investigation, saying she was not properly notified of her disappearance through official channels and that instead she was only informed unofficially by her daughter's staff and media coverage. The family is calling for Congress to investigate her death and how the family was notified.
Our thanks to Whit Johnson. At least 30 people were killed in Gaza while attempting to get food at an aid site in the central part of the territory. It's one of many recent incidents during which Israel has killed Palestinians, primarily who were seeking handouts of food, aid, and shelter. Let's turn now to Tom Sufi Burridge. And Tom, what do the Israeli Defense Forces say happened here?
Yeah, Lindsay, the IDF says the incident is under review. Now, they say that they have no reports or no information about IDF fire during daylight hours corresponding to some of the video circulating in the media. But they do say that they once again have fired what they call warning shots, quote, towards suspects. Now, we have asked Israeli officials to clarify what warning shots towards people means because it's a slightly confusing term and we're waiting for clarification on that. But as you say, say, this is another incident near to one of those aid distribution sites in Gaza, another deadly incident. And once again, it is raising questions about the morality behind this scheme and whether or not it is contributing not only to the desperation and the hunger in Gaza, but also to the death toll from the war.
Of course, so many questions. This is one of 4 aid sites in operation. Who's manning these sites, and is enough aid getting through?
Yeah, this is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Basically, it's an American-backed group, American companies. I interviewed their new executive chairman just a few days ago. Look, they're running the sites themselves. There's only 4 of them. They're quite limited areas that Gazans have to move towards in what they call safe corridors. And once, if people have deviated from those safe corridors, that's when we've seen these deadly incidents, according to the IDF. But look, you know, we've seen huge crowds turn up to these areas. Look, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says it has distributed millions and millions of meals to thousands and thousands of Gazans. It says it is doing the best it can to alleviate the hunger of people in Gaza. But look, international aid agencies have refused to participate in this scheme. They accuse the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation of basically being part of Israel's military strategy, because Israel has wanted this type of scheme to be up and running because it says it is necessary to prevent aid going into the hands of Hamas, which it alleges was going on in the past throughout the war. The UN says there's no clear evidence of that. But look, it's a contentious scheme. When I interviewed the new executive chairman of that group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, look, he said he pushed back very strongly on the criticism. And he said, look, I'm not doing this. We're not doing this so that anybody dies. Quite the opposite. And he pushed back on the notion that the scheme itself is actually putting people in disproportionate danger. Lindsay?
All right, Tom Sufi-Burridge for us. Thanks to you. U.S. and Chinese officials say they've reached a tentative agreement to get trade relations back on track. Details are sparse, but President Trump said China will make it easier for the U.S. to get much-needed magnets and rare earth minerals, and the U.S. will stop efforts to revoke the student visas of Chinese nationals. Both leaders will still have to approve this new agreement. Tonight, ABC News flying over Washington, D.C. with the Secret Service. What will Saturday's military parade and security look like? And the president's warning for any protesters. Our Victor Oquendo above the nation's capital tonight.
Tonight, we suited up and boarded a U.S. Park Police helicopter with the Secret Service for an exclusive aerial tour over the nation's capital. As authorities begin securing President Trump's massive military parade set for Saturday, which coincides with the president's birthday.
The entire area around the White House has been completely transformed. From above, we can see the nearly 20 miles of fencing leading right up to where President Trump will be on Saturday. Authorities tell me this will be the safest place in the world.
We saw dozens of tanks lined up near the National Mall, and this very close flyby the Washington Monument.
People waving at you from the windows.
Authorities then taking us behind the scenes on the ground.
Well, they were expecting hundreds of thousands of people on the mall. You will see us stands here full of our dignitaries and VIPs to include the president.
That's where the president will be?
Yep, right up there.
The parade will feature nearly 7,000 soldiers, 28 tanks, as well as dozens of armored fighting vehicles, and just added mounted rocket launchers and precision-guided missiles. The military display, the White House says, is to mark the Army's 250th birthday. The price tag, up to $45 million.
Victor Oquendo joins us now from Washington. And Victor, we know that protests are planned across the country and in D.C. on Saturday. What has the president said would be the response from law enforcement?
That's right, Lindsay. President Trump warned that protesters would be met with very big force. The White House pressed on this again tonight, saying that they do support peaceful protests. Lindsay?
Victor Oquendo, our thanks to you. Coming up, families separated at what would otherwise be regular Homeland Security check-ins. In tonight's Prime Focus, how this could impact the future of the legal immigration process.
The tactic is to terrorize, to corner people into making a hard decision of not showing up, right, to their court hearing, and also to be very cruel.
Then, how one airline shut its doors overnight, leaving its customers and employees stranded. And later, remembering the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson, we look at the legacy of the former leader of one of the biggest bands of all time. Welcome back. As the Trump administration ramps up arrests of migrants at court hearings and what would otherwise be regular Homeland Security check-ins, our Maria Villarreal takes a look in our prime focus at how those arrests are affecting migrant families, many of whom have small children and are sometimes American citizens, and the chilling effect lawyers say it will have on the legal immigration process.
This is Carmen, walking out of a San Antonio immigration court, hands zip-tied behind her back with ICE agents forcing her into a secured transport van. Moments after her immigration case was dismissed. Her husband, a U.S. citizen, walking nearby, trying to protect her.
Pues íbamos felices porque pensábamos que íbamos a dar un avance más a su caso. Y entramos y hasta en la misma corte, cuando estaban hablando con la juez, está uno de inmigración sentado ahí mandando mensajes a los de afuera. Yo lo vi porque yo le dije a él, le dije, tú eres de migración. Y él no me decía nada, se quedaba callado.
When you exited the court, what happened?
Se le amontonaron los agentes para quererla agarrar. Ella les dijo que tenía a sus hijas aquí en la casa, que por favor no se la llevara. Y no, a ellos no les importa nada de eso.
One of Carmen's 5 daughters, 7-year-old Galilea, worries her mother may never come home. Galilea and her sisters, also U.S. citizens.
And then my mom couldn't breathe, her hand was twisted, and I don't know, she was they put her in a dog cage, I don't know.
Attorneys for the Department of Justice filed to dismiss Carmen's case without notifying her attorneys, and the judge granted the request despite objections from her legal team.
Carmen walked out of the courtroom and was immediately detained by ICE because she was no longer under the jurisdiction and therefore the protection of the immigration court. Everything has been turned on its head because ICE is now seeking to dismiss all the cases before the court so that they can apply what's called expedited removal to people, and that essentially is a deportation without due process.
Expedited removal is a process that allows the government to quickly deport migrants without a hearing before an immigration judge. Under President Biden, the process applied to apprehended migrants who'd recently crossed into the U.S. near the border. But President Trump has expanded its use to apply to migrants apprehended in the interior of the country who've been in the U.S. for less than 2 years. Homeland Security defending the practice, saying in a statement that if migrants have a credible claim of fear, they will continue in immigration proceedings. But if no valid claim is found, aliens will be subject to a swift deportation. Kate Lincoln Goldfinch is the immigration attorney representing Carmen. She calls this family separation 2.0.
What makes this, I think, even worse than the family separations at the border is that many of these families have been living in the United States for many years. And like Carmen, these kids are U.S. citizens, their spouses are U.S. citizens, and these families are getting torn apart. And the aftermath is so traumatic.
Have you been able to talk to your mom?
Yes. Yesterday I talked to her.
You did?
Yep.
Did you share any secrets?
No.
No secrets. What did you tell her?
That she told me that she misses me, and I told her I miss her. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then what do you do now that your mommy's been gone for a little bit? What are you trying to do to help around here?
Save money.
You're saving money? What are you saving money for?
To take her out.
Yeah?
Carmen is just one of thousands caught up in the administration's latest attempt to detain and deport more migrants. The Immigrant Legal Resource Center in San Antonio has been sending volunteers to this immigration court for weeks to help people understand their rights and document all of this.
Is this private property?
We'll just close the door. How about that?
Okay, that's great. The tactic is to terrorize, to corner people into making a hard decision of not showing up, right, to their court hearing, and also to be very cruel. If there is arrests or detainments, they want to show very visible cruelty of that very inhumane process that it has become.
Why is she being detained?
Similar scenes like this are also playing out at DHS check-in facilities and immigration courts across the country. In New York, we found Ambar praying for her husband's safe return after what they thought was a routine check-in with immigration officials.
Haciendo nada malo, que lo que queremos es estar juntos. Lo único que le pido a Dios y a ellos que tengan un poquito de piedad para nosotros que somos su familia. Yo no tengo a más nadie acá. Yo estoy sola con mi hija, no quiero separarme de él.
Moments later, her husband John emerged, handcuffed. His stepdaughter overcome with emotion. In 2023, ABC News spoke with the Colombian-Venezuelan family after they were separated at the border and later reunited. John was supposed to check in later this month, but ICE asked him to come in 2 weeks early on the 2-year anniversary of his arrival in the U.S., making him susceptible to expedited removal. It's unclear at the moment under which authority he's being detained. Outrage now growing as reports of workplace ICE raids ramp up.
What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before. A 4-year-old girl taken, families separated, friends quite literally disappearing.
The administration did not respond to our request for information on expedited removal or the cases involving John and Carmen. But in an interview with ABC's Matt Gutman, Border Czar Tom Homan laid out his plan.
I'm going to flood the zone. We're going to flood the zone because now we got to send a whole team to look for one guy. If we got 100 guys, we got to send a lot of teams. So if they don't want to give access to the bad guy in the jail, then we got to go to the community. If we can't find the community, we'll find them at the workplace. We're stepping up worksite enforcement all across the country, including LA.
That's far from what the administration first promised.
We have to get them out. And we start with the worst of the criminals. We start with the drug lords. We start with the worst of the criminals.
Eduardo and Carmen have been together for more than 10 years. And he admits life without her is hard on him, but it's hard especially on his girls.
¿Cómo estás ahorita?
Pues está triste. Ya quiere salir desesperada. Quiere ver a sus hijas, abrazarlas. Ella piensa que no las va a volver a ver. Dice que no puede ni dormir a veces porque nomás está pensando en sus hijas. Pues está sufriendo ahí adentro mucho. Y no nomás ella, muchas personas, igual que yo, también están sufriendo de separar, que nos hayan separado de nuestras esposas o nuestros familiares.
What do you tell her to give her hope? ¿Qué dicen para hacer esperanza?
Pues le digo que se calme, que yo estoy luchando aquí para tratar de sacarla, que no la voy a dejar adentro, que nunca la voy a dejar sola. Voy a luchar por ella hasta no poder.
Just one of so many stories. Our thanks to Maria Villarreal. He is the most followed man on TikTok, and now he has left the United States after being detained by immigration officials. Why federal officials targeted the social media star. But first, it's the most coveted piece of gaming technology. We're taking a look at the record-breaking Switch 2 sales by the numbers. Welcome back, everyone. Last week, the long-awaited Nintendo Switch 2 was finally released. The excitement for the more powerful game system was so high, in fact, that pre-orders overwhelmed retail websites and gamers waited on long lines on release day trying to get their hands on one. Now Nintendo says the more powerful console has already broken sales records, which is quite impressive given the company's track record. Let's take a look at the hype behind the Switch 2. by the numbers. Nintendo said that more than 3.5 million units were sold worldwide in its first 4 days, its fastest selling console ever. The company said it was aiming to sell 15 million units by March of next year, so far so good. And these Switch 2s, they don't come cheap. They're listed at $449.99, so for a little extra, you can bundle it with the new Mario Kart World game that was released the same day. This is the first new Nintendo system release in 8 years. And for comparison, the original Nintendo Switch system sold an estimated 2.7 million units in its first month when it was released back in 2017, and has since become one of the best-selling consoles globally with more than 152 million units sold. But number one on that list, that is still the PlayStation 2, which has sold more than 160 million units since it was released in 2000. Coming up, we're remembering Brian Wilson, the original Beach Boy. Plus, from Ted Lasso fan favorite to going deep cover in his latest action comedy. Coming up, we sit down with Nick Mohammed about his new role of an improv actor gone rogue. President Trump and the First Lady walked the carpet tonight at the Kennedy Center ahead of a performance of Les Miserables. This just months after he fired the center's longtime director and the rest of the board. The president replaced the board with loyalists who later named him as chairman. Since returning to office, Trump has pledged to rid the performing arts venue of, quote, woke programming and political correctness. He took questions on the carpet tonight when asked about actors in Les Mis opting not to perform. Trump said, quote, "I couldn't care less. All I do is run the country well." The world's most popular TikToker leaves the country after ICE orders him out. The traveler is left stranded by a sudden airline announcement, and a rare sight awaits in the night sky tonight. These stories and more in tonight's Rundown. The most followed man on TikTok confirmed that he has left the United States after being detained by immigration officials in Las Vegas. Federal officials say that Kabani Lama overstayed his visa in the U.S., and they allowed him to leave the country without a formal deportation order. The popular influencer boasts a massive TikTok fan base with more than 162 million followers. Lama originally is from Senegal and immigrated to Italy as a child. He has not publicly commented on the matter. A regional airline that operates out of Florida announced they are shutting down operations immediately, telling customers do not go to the airport. The move is leaving some passengers stranded in airports across Florida and the Caribbean. Silver Airlines said that the holding company that purchased all their assets during bankruptcy proceedings decided to discontinue operating the airline. The company said customers can request refunds for future flights through their credit card company or travel agency. Another wrinkle in the retrial of the Massachusetts woman accused of striking and killing her boyfriend with her car. Karen Reed announced in court that she would not testify in the second trial. The first trial ended in a hung jury. Reed is charged with second-degree murder, among other charges. She pleaded not guilty. 2 people were found dead in a remote campground inside Isle Royale National Park in Michigan. Park rangers hiked 11 miles overnight through the wilderness and arrived to find 2 dead bodies at the scene. The national park sits on an island in Lake Superior, only accessible by plane or boat, making rescue operations difficult. Park officials say their cause of death is unknown and an investigation is underway to determine how the campers died. Newly elected Pope Leo named the first Chinese bishop of his papacy. The appointment of Bishop Joseph Lin Yun-tuan is a continuation of an agreement struck by Pope Francis and the Chinese government in 2018 that allows for more Chinese bishops to be represented in Vatican City. The Vatican said in a statement that the announcement constitutes a further fruit of the dialogue between the Holy See and the Chinese authorities and is a significant step in the diocese's communal journey. Nothing says summer like a full moon, and tonight Americans across the country are in for a sweet treat. The first full moon of the season appears with a pinkish hue and is appropriately named the Strawberry Moon. The name apparently comes from Native Americans who celebrated the first full moon in June, which coincided with the short strawberry harvesting season. So if you're outside tonight, look up at the sky to catch a glimpse of this cosmic phenomenon. Time tonight for the latest in our series Streamlined, where we bring you some of the biggest films and TV series hitting screens worldwide, speaking with some of the actors and creators behind them. In Prime Video's latest action comedy, 3 improv actors join a low-level police sting, but their refusal to break character plunges them deep into London's criminal underworld. Starring Bryce Dallas Howard, Orlando Bloom, and Nick Mohammed, Deep Cover blends the nail-biting action of a classic crime thriller with tongue-in-cheek humor as our heroes are drawn deeper and deeper into the city's dark criminal network. Let's take a look.
Hugh, you in?
Oh, gosh. Police. Gets your blood pumping just saying the word, doesn't it? I don't know. It might be tricky getting time off work.
Dude.
Joining us now is Emmy-nominated actor and comedian known for his role as Nathan Shelley in Ted Lasso, Nick Mohammed. Nick, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Okay, so you play Hugh, as we just saw, and he really is this awkward guy. He's joining the improv classes to try to break out of his shell.
Yeah.
How did you actually approach playing somebody who's just so awkward that the audience actually cringes watching him?
Oh, I don't know. I quite like characters like that. I like that he goes on a journey. Yeah, he absolutely does start, at crossroads in his life. He lacks confidence, doesn't really have a support network or a group of friends. But, through the course of the film, even though he couldn't have predicted that he would start, going on these sting operations, going undercover and it escalating out of control, he does slowly kind of build his confidence and finds his people.
I know sometimes when I'm watching myself back, I can be embarrassed at myself, and I'm playing myself.
Yeah.
When you're playing Hugh, do you ever watch and actually kind of feel embarrassed yourself for this guy?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. I know what you mean. I tend not to watch too much back as me, but
Understood.
when you see stuff at premieres or screenings and stuff, you kind of inevitably have to. But yeah, occasionally I'm like, no.
I'm sure as an actor, you've done some improv classes. What kind of tips might you give Hugh, who's trying to do his improv?
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? I never trained as an actor ever, and so I've never done improv classes before. And I mean, I enjoy, because I do a lot of live comedy. There is obviously an element of sort of thinking on your feet, and occasionally you have to improvise. But I much prefer to sort of stick to a script. And we were so lucky with this film script that it was great, and Ben and Alex who wrote it were just, we didn't really have to improvise on set or anything like that. But what tips would I give Hugh? Try to relax, I guess. Just try and relax a little bit, try and be a bit more present.
I guess that is really key in acting in general. That's so interesting that you never even trained for it. How did you get into it?
I kind of stumbled into it. I was doing very weird. I was doing a PhD in geophysics at university, and I got involved with the comedy sketch group, the university sketch group there, and then went up to the Edinburgh Festival with a show, which meant I had to have a little bit of time off doing my sort of studies, and had a little bit of interest from a producer and an agent, but nothing, substantial. But it was enough to make me think, oh, I'm going to try and give it a go.
And you've left the geophysics behind.
I have now, yeah. I'm not going back to it.
You mentioned just how clever the script is. It really combines comedy and crime, and you've described that as actually kind of walking a tightrope. How did you navigate that?
Well, I think it really, because often those disciplines, action and comedy, pull, in different directions. But there was just something about this script. It's such a great, delicate dance. It bounces between the two. The comedy feels very funny. The action feels very thrilling. And, look, comedy's a safe space for me. I'm kind of always happy to do comedy. But the action and some of the more dramatic parts are still quite new to me. And this was the first sort of more leading role in a film that I'd ever done. And, getting to play with Bryce and Orlando, proper movie stars, I was like, oh, wow. But, I got to lean into that, and it was all great fun.
Well, of course, as we mentioned at the top there, many people know you from Ted Lasso. Congratulations. You guys have just been granted the green light on a 4th season.
I know, it's going again, yeah.
And your character will be back?
Well, we'll have to see. I'm not sure. I haven't read anything. I know that it's obviously about the women's football team, so, not everyone's going to be able to come back because there's going to be a lot of new characters. But, maybe Nate will pop up. We'll see.
We are hoping. We are hoping, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
For coming back on the show. Deep Cover premieres on Prime Video tomorrow, June 12th. A gifted singer, songwriter, and leader of the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson was an artistic genius who left his peers in awe. Tonight, World News Tonight anchor David Muir looks back at his music, his personal battles, and his enduring influence.
Here are the Beach Boys.
Round, year round, I get around, yeah, get around. I get around, round, I get around.
Brian Wilson was the leader, the chief songwriter for the Beach Boys. They were the kings of the summer anthem. There was I Get Around.
Round, round, get around, I get around, yeah, get around, round, round, I get around.
19-year-old Brian Wilson with his brothers Dennis and Carl, cousin Mike Love, and their good friend Al Jardine, becoming the Beach Boys, the defining American band of that era. Brian Wilson didn't surf, but his gift for music left his peers in awe. Their breakthrough, Surfin' USA, in 1963. And it was Brian who took the harmonies the group perfected as high schoolers in Hawthorne, California, and turned them into rock and roll royalty. Writing, arranging, and producing most of their catalog, singing as the lead co-vocalist and playing the guitar and keyboard, too. Riding a wave of success with so many hits, including Help Me Rhonda, California Girls. And Don't Worry Baby.
Who determines, Brian, what will be done next?
Well, I guess I do. I don't know. I write the songs and produce them, so I have a lot to say about it.
There was fun, fun, fun.
And she'll have fun, 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 till the daddy takes the table away. Fun, fun, till the daddy takes the table away. Now the girls can't
They would dominate the charts.
rise like an ace now, you walk like an ace.
But Brian Wilson would acknowledge he had trouble with the fame. He would take a break from touring, overwhelmed by the band's success. 2 years later, in 1966, writing the band's most critically acclaimed album, Pet Sounds. It wasn't a commercial hit at first. It was different. It was deep. Paul McCartney saying it was that album that blew me out of the water. McCartney saying, I figured no one is educated musically till they've heard that album. That album with the classic Wouldn't It Be Nice, now considered one of the greatest albums of all time. McCartney saying God Only Knows reduces him to tears. Good Vibrations followed shortly after, selling more than 1 million copies, more than any other Beach Boys single.
I'm picking up vibrations. She's giving me the excitation.
But Brian Wilson would struggle, saying once, I had a hell of a time getting through some of the frustrations that go along with being a successful artist. I was riding a wave, riding a crest. Then later on, I got scared. I got lost. He struggled with mental health and drugs. Brian Wilson died today at the age of 82, the last surviving brother. And through the years, when asked how he wanted to be remembered, he would often say, I just hope people will remember me as a guy who really wrote good music.
I think that music is very healing. It puts me into a quiet place to create or to do what I'm supposed to do.
His music defining an era.
He will likely be remembered as he wished. Our thanks to David for that. That is our show for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us.